Welcome to episode 43 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. In this episode's main segment, I'm interviewing Bobby Rowe and Zack Andrews. They recently wrote and directed a found footage horror thriller script called The Houses October Built. They shot a really low budget version of their film, got some heat on that version of it, and then were able to go shoot a higher production version. It's a great success story, and they go into some real detail about how it all came together. So stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast. A couple of quick notes. Any websites or links that I mentioned in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts, and then just look for episode number 43. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide, how to write a professional logline and query letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. It really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm talking with filmmakers Bobby Rowe and Zack Andrews. Here is the interview. Welcome, Bobby and Zack, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you guys coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So I wonder to start out, I wonder if you can just give us a quick overview of your career and how you got into the entertainment industry and ultimately made this film, The Houses October Built.
Well, we've been best friends for what's coming on 20 years now. We both went to Plano Senior High in Texas. And we played basketball together, and then I went on to Baylor, and Bobby went out to UCLA to play baseball. So we stayed, in touch and best friends, and we'd spend the summers either in LA or in Waco writing and just trying to get our film, career off the ground. So that kind of got us to both being in LA and living together when we were in our early 20s, and then from there.
Yeah, we after getting out of college, we ended up we got a little bit of heat on a screenplay, and then we ended up with kind of going around town when we were about 23, 24 years old, and it was an experience, and I think a lot of it, it didn't end up coming to fruition the way we wanted it to, but I think we're probably all at a better place because of that. I mean, I think the 10 years in between that is what's really built our career. We really understand it. I mean, otherwise it really would have felt easy. And we all know that it is the very, very opposite of that. So, we're probably fortunate the way it turned out, and what we've learned over the past 10 years in all different capacities of film, being on different sets, having different jobs, has really kind of built us into, kind of who we are today, and trying to attack different stories, different subject matter that we probably wouldn't have done in the past, but we wanted to just make sure that we, hit something that the audience really wanted or hasn't seen before.
Mm-hmm. I think having those failures, we had some low budget horror films come really close to production and they would fall apart, and just dealing with that frustration and getting those reps kind of in the screenwriting process helped. And it pushed us to then say, you know what, fuck it, we're just going to go do this ourselves. So I think that, it's all, as cliche as it sounds, like going through the process, and it takes 10 years, you read all of that and hear all that, and then you live it yourself. It's not so fun, but when you can find some success on the end, you look back and you go, oh, that's what all those people were talking about.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what do you guys consider yourself? Writers, directors, actors? You guys have both done kind of everything.
I think filmmakers, hopefully, is kind of how it, we like all sides of it. We didn't initially want to cast ourselves in the movie, but the style of the film that we made, we needed to make sure that we were directing the actors, we use a lot of real scare actors. We wanted it to be as organic as possible. So there needed to be some guidance, some natural guidance on the story that we were telling. So the only way to really kind of execute that was us being in it. And we do have some past experience in it, but it was never the initial plan. but I think we just kind of like all different facets of it. And whenever we can, we'd like to at least be in some way involved. You don't have to have the exact title for it, but we just enjoyed the whole movie making process.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and let's dig into the houses October built. You guys, at least on IMDb, it looks like you guys made a documentary first, a couple years ago, and then now you've made the found footage fictional version of that. So maybe just let's take it back to, it sounds like, Zack, from what you just said, you guys just went out there and made the first version yourself. So let's start out with that. How did this first version of the Houses October Built get made, and where did that come from?
Yeah, we wanted to think of a world that hadn't been really shown on film, and that wouldn't break our banks, and we'd be able to kind of do it on our own and be able to fund it and things of that nature. So we'd always, growing up, loved haunted houses and loved Halloween, and especially Bobby takes great pride every year in having this hidden Halloween costume that he won't tell anybody about, but he wants to unveil it, on Halloween. So I mean, we're really passionate about the holiday, but specifically, we love going to Universal Horror Nights and things like that. So we thought, well, why hasn't there been a movie about these places? Forget things about possession and that type of thing. What about actually real places where you go in the dark with these people and they have masks on, and you don't know really what could happen, and their job is to scare you. So we just wanted to center a story around that world. And once we got that idea, we just kind of outlined the way that we saw the progression of the story happening. And then, like Bobby was saying, we're able to manipulate things along the way when we needed to, but it was actually surprising, some of the things that just happened organically with what these people were saying and doing. So
was that first version, it was not because on IMDb it's listed as a documentary. Was it a found footage film, basically?
Well, I guess this is the best way to that we've explained it, is that, okay, Blair Witch is fake from frame one, right? So 1999, that works perfectly. Beginning of the actual internet advertising, marketing. But in today's time, it's the genre itself is so watered down. We understand that. But what we wanted to do is make something be real, maybe till it's not, or I dare you to tell me what part isn't. Using the real people, using the real environments was our biggest kind of selling point. Because, and I think that translates on film as well, that you're seeing the passion and the things that come out of some of these people's mouths you couldn't write on your best day. Like, it's just, you're baffled they said it on film. So yes, it's a documentary, but there are elements, there's more of a twist to it, I'd say. And this version is it's the bigger, upscale, more studio version of that. So that's probably the best way to explain it, because it still falls under the doc category, I think, but there's a little more to it.
Okay.
Lake Mungo if you've ever seen that, it's maybe a good analogy, I hope.
What movie was that?
You ever seen Lake Mungo?
No.
It's an Australian film, and it may be on Netflix streaming now. But it's one of the best faux docs I've ever seen on its just its authenticity.
Yeah, because you just don't buy a lot of these films, and that was kind of what I think an element, besides capturing the haunted house, the Carney haunted house, for the first time. The other part was we had shown this movie to people and we're getting good feedback, but we needed somebody, a heavy hitter to get on board. And I'll never forget answering the phone. And it was Steven Schneider, who produced the Paranormal Activity movies and Insidious. And one of the first things out of his mouth was, I love this because it's real until it isn't. And you can't really tell me when that change takes place. And this is the original documentary. And with his guidance on board, he was able to say, okay, look, this idea and what you guys have done is revolutionary and fantastic, and I'm such a big fan, but we've got to make the more studio version of this tale. And so then that's, then when Bobby and I got our heads back together and said, okay, how do we do that? And so it's, the movies are definitely similar, but I think people that love haunted houses could get equal enjoyment out of both. One is, more of a ride, and one of them is more of a documentary.
So let's back it up to, right before you guys did this first version of the film. And I think this will be inspiring to the listeners. Just go through some of the nuts and bolts, the logistics of, how did you raise the money even to shoot a really low budget version of this? And what was that like? Who crewed it? Where did you get all those resources?
So it probably goes back to, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners are the same exact way. It's probably stuck in all of our heads since whatever that was, 93, with Kevin Smith doing Clerks. I mean, I've heard my whole life since I was a kid about this guy that put his balls out there and put everything on a credit card. Then he called and got other credit cards, and he really made Clerks on money he didn't have, but yet owned up to it and took that shot. And that's very inspirational to us in general. But we were thinking along the lines of, okay, we can raise this. But then there's also a part where we'd lose a lot of ownership, a lot of power. So we tried to figure out, and that was kind of when the story developed with shooting on. Some of these places have $500,000 to $1 million sets. I mean, that's what some of these haunted houses are. So if you told me anywhere in Hollywood that I could go walk into one of the studios and have free access to an already built set, shoot on there as long as I want, that was kind of the idea for the production value. We were able to do that for free. And that's unheard of. I mean, if I had wanted to shoot one bar scene in LA, it would cost me $1,500 on minimum. And that's just a shitty bar, some seedy bar. I mean, so using that kind of idea, we honestly, we did the same thing Kevin Smith did. We just put our credit cards together and just started swiping because it was the only thing we could do. We didn't have the money to back it up, but we knew we had to take our shot. It was right at the beginning of Paranormal. We'd actually had the idea right before Paranormal Activity came out, and they went the supernatural route, so that was good. And we wanted to take it, a much more grounded approach. So it's always hard for us because we always explain Halloween haunted house. Because if you say haunted house, people roll their eyes like, oh, another ghost movie, or supernatural. And that's something we wanted to steer clear of because that doesn't exactly frighten us. What frightens us is what real human beings do to real human beings.
Yeah. I actually went to a haunted house once. You guys have several times in your movie the chainsaw, and I went to one with a chainsaw, and you're sitting there thinking, is this guy really smart enough to make this safe? And he had actually taken the chain off the chainsaw. We found out later. But those things are really scary because the guys that are doing this, they're sketchy as hell.
You'll enjoy this story then. There's an interview in the movie where we actually get a guy on tape that describes exactly what you're saying. He handles the chainsaw, right? And he said, well, there may have been times that I thought for fun to leave the chain on, and he did. He's left the chain on before, and he told us that on camera. I mean, he trips and falls. He's cutting his leg off or yours.
And he was proud of it. I mean, he really was like, I have done a tour with the chain on the chainsaw.
Yeah. So I want to back up to one thing you said about, getting the bar in, renting a bar in LA in $1,500. It's like everybody in LA kind of is very sophisticated and understands. So so you shot this in Texas, and is that sort of the gist of it? You went to someplace outside of LA, so you were able to get these locations for free. I'm curious. I mean, these haunted houses, though, they must have known that they did have something of value, and I'm surprised you were able to negotiate, hey, we're going to shoot a film here. Do you guys mind if we shoot?
But we're giving them something of value back. They knew our approach. They knew what we were doing. And the fact is if as long as it's successful, our hope, and I think it's what I would do, being just an audience member, is I would take that haunt tour, the same one we did. We just got asked.
They're real places. I mean, you can go to the places and experience the same thing that we did in the movie.
We made a point to Chiron it in the movie so people could do that. A magazine just asked us to do an article about haunts because not that we ever were experienced in it that much before, but the past 5 years, it's been our life. So we've heard of everything around the world. We've talked to these people. So they wanted us to give their list of where we would like to go and where we did go in the making the movie. So I would love it. Like, I mean, if I was 18 years old, I would get in the car and go with my buddies, across the South, take 4 or 5 days and just go hit some of these places like we did, because it was always a dream trip for us, and we were just happy that it worked out, and get paid to do it. So that was
yeah, yeah. So you mentioned Paranormal Activity, which now it was obviously several years ago. So you guys have been working on this for a while, and I'm just curious what's sort of been in the interim, and maybe you can take us through some of those steps. Obviously, the key moment, Zach, you just mentioned is when Steve calls you up and says, "Hey, I really love this. Let's take it to the next level." But maybe you can fill us in on some of the details of what you were doing. You racked it up on credit cards. You shot this thing. So then, what do you do with this movie for the 5 years as you're trying to promote it and get it out there and basically get your careers to the next level?
Just trying to show it to people in the industry that we knew and just could get, feedback on it and anybody that could pass it along and that kind of thing. And, we wanted to keep it pretty tight as well. It wasn't something that we were, just blasting around everyone, because we knew there was this bigger version, with Bobby was saying, more professional sound and things of that nature. And so we wanted to keep it a little bit tight. And then, and really when Steven came on board, then he was able to get it into the bigger hands and get that ball rolling. And that was, it actually, that process has been, a couple of years. So it really wasn't 5 years of just sitting with this movie. It was more, a year of planning it, a year of shooting it and editing it, and then a year of Steven getting it, and then another year, of doing the reshoots, and then another year of re-editing.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
They're actually, I don't feel like there's been downtime, as crazy as that sounds.
But when you shoot doc style, you have doc style footage, and meaning you have hundreds of hours. So we were in the edit bay, I think around 600 hours. Just going through all of that footage to make sure. I mean, we had our skeleton, we had everything we knew we needed, but there's certain times you find this rare moment where it maybe even you called cut and the camera still rolls, right? Like there's certain things, the moments like that maybe in the movie, and like filtering all those is just a really long process, as opposed to a normal feature that we buy the book. You could almost hand off to an editor and he knows exactly what scene to hit in exactly the right coverage, yada, yada. That's not the same way. Even though this is a feature, it's shot in a doc way, and we wanted to make sure we had the most amount of footage. We didn't want to waste any time, because a seasonal movie, as this is, if we missed anything, there's no real pickups, because we can't go back to the haunts. The haunts are closed. There's no patrons. There's no scare actors, so we couldn't be wrong. So there have been some really, really long nights of shooting, but we just had to make sure we had it.
Yeah. So I just want to touch on what, Zach, you were saying about being tight with this film once you kind of got this first version done. You didn't enter into any festivals, anything like that. You didn't try and get it out there at all, find a distributor or sales agent?
Pretty minimal. We did do a local LA festival called Shockfest, and we ended up winning the Shocker Award for the best movie. But yeah, for the most part, it was more of just trying to. We just wanted the big version. We wanted to be able to use this as precious as we were and proud of the movie. We also wanted it to be kind of a calling card and an entry in to the industry. So we were. So you were clear right from the get-go that this was not the finished version. You wanted to make this version to show people how cool this idea could be. Well,
yes and no. Yeah. I think that what we tried to do, what helped us get a little bit of a jumping off point was Shockfest. And when we were asked to open for Eli Roth, because he was getting an award for I can't remember, for the past decade, and they asked our movie to open for him as well before they were going to show an encore of Cabin Fever and give him his award. So I think that got a little bit of press, and that got some of the word out there. And then when Steven called, probably a couple weeks after, we made the choice to not enter any more festivals and kind of pull things to not do that anymore, because we're trying to play it close to the chest. We have a little bit of a spin and twist to it, and there was no point in getting it out there if we'd already gotten to basically the man that we needed to get it to anyway. What's the point? That's the point of these festivals. That's the point, is to get to the next level. And once we had done that, there was no reason of passing it around.
Okay. And just to be absolutely clear on that, because I think these points are always very crucial. You got it to Steve. He got it basically. He heard by winning this festival. He somehow heard from it. Did he call up and say, "Could I get a copy of it?" Did you know? Like, just take us through the logistics of that, because that seems like kind of the tipping point for this film.
Yeah. I don't think there's not a right like way to get it to somebody. And the fact is how it exactly got to him, I'm not exactly sure, because he wasn't at the festival. But when that,
I think what's hard is to say, and trust me, I'm someone that reads about filmmaking and would be listening to your podcast, and everybody's looking for a way, what is the best path? And I can't tell you not to enter film festivals. I'm not saying that that's a good path. That might be the worst advice ever. You just have to think about, for you, what your goals are, and try to do as much research as you can and find. I like to think of it as like maybe even one big, haunted house with 10 doors, and there's tons of crazy shit behind each one of them. And you kind of just want to take some time and really analyze, what are you trying to accomplish? What's behind door number 1? What potentially could be behind door number 2? And really go that route with it. They're really, we have friends that have worked in the industry as assistants, and they get tons of contacts. So you're a screenwriter and you're thinking, oh, I've got to move to Hollywood and be an assistant. Well, that's a good path. That's worked out for some friends of ours, and now they're writing screenplays and making 6 figures. But as we know, 99% of the time that doesn't work out. And then if you're thinking, oh, I'm a writer, I can be anywhere. Well, that's not exactly, I wouldn't give that advice either, because every day in LA there's potential for meeting someone, and you have drinks with somebody, and people that I met 10 years ago, in some form or fashion have opened doors with this movie. And so I would say you should be here and keep things close to the chest. But that's just what worked for us. You could be in Nebraska and blast your script to anyone who will read it, and that might be the right way for you.
I think the hardest lesson to learn is that, because a lot of the scripts are the ones that we like and the ones that we like to write have hopefully an ending or a twist to them. We've just always enjoyed those. And so in that nature, we're very secretive about a lot of story ideas and scripts. And what's so hard is if you play it too close to the chest, no one will ever find out about it. And so I wish I could give like some definitive advice on that, because we've done that, and maybe to a fault on certain things. Maybe things could have started earlier, but we didn't trust a lot of people in this town. We didn't, so we were just very careful of who got it, and in that way we didn't get a lot of exposure with certain things because they're still on our hard drive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's talk about sort of the collaboration of this film. Jeff Larson has a writing credit on this as well. So maybe you can take us through just the process of actually writing this script. As you said, there's a lot of stuff in there that you couldn't write on your best day. So what does a script like this actually look like? What was your process for coming up with it?
Well, I think we worked with him. He and I went to film school together, and a lot of times in film school, you look around, and a lot of the movies that these students like, you don't. There's a lot of things. I have no problem with mainstream. I just appreciate creativity. And, and Jeff was another guy who's a horror guy.
Bobby would come back from film school and be like, that somebody's, pitching some, let's say a romantic comedy, and everyone's talking about, oh, romantic, let's go back to, cinema history and just watch Casablanca, which I love Casablanca. It's one of my favorite movies, but we don't have to glorify every movie from, only if it's over 80 years old. And so Bobby, found this one guy that he was like, this guy's, kind of like us. He's more, we're in the back talking horror while they're talking, about, movies that are, more in the history of cinema. So he, kind of came on board.
Well, yeah, that's my favorite thing to do. I like to walk into people's living room for the first time and judge them by their DVD collection. You can tell a lot about a person. And, if they sit there and just have AFI's top 10, I think they lack creativity. They're doing what they've been told, a certain, 30 years before they were alive, and that's their favorite movie. It's very tough. I always appreciate it, and I love the history of film, and I go back all the way to the 20s all the time. And there's so many things that we watched a movie that could have been a snuff film not too long ago. It was, I think, 1929. And just little things like that, you learn from it. And so I think that whole process is great, but then you got to also surround yourself with people that have the same ideas and kind of outlook on certain things. So that's kind of how we did that nobody really appreciated horror. Horror was also a genre where you don't need A-list celebrities to make the movie. And I think that's the big key here, is that you can tell creativity through story and not just through showiness.
Yeah, and that led us to then, once we had Jeff on board, then, Bobby and I and Jeff, kind of wove this story together. And then, we needed a cast, and we knew we needed a girl that, one, would be able to put up with us, for weeks in an RV going around the country, but then also that had that look. And we really feel like Brandy just personifies that. She's a guy's girl that's, she went to our same high school, and she went to USC and studied dance and acting. And so we just thought she was a perfect fit to come on board and be a part of this. And really, I think she just really pops on screen, and it couldn't have worked out better from her attitude and just being down for everything, but then also having that look that I think a lot of the fans are going to have a crush on her. That was actually a funny story that a lot of people that have known her for years will text Bobby and I and be like, dude, is Brandy single? And it's like, dude, you've known her for 10 years. Like, why are you just because you saw the movie and now you see what she looks like on screen? You're I think people kind of fall in love with her and, have a little crush.
Well, we wanted to steer clear too of the blonde, big titted, lead girl, because you just would have seen us coming a mile away. That's what it would have felt like. It would have felt like a normal, a stereotypical horror movie. And we didn't want to do that. And she's very disarming. And the things that she gets some of these people to say or just answer in a very, very real way, an honest way, is baffling. And she makes people forget the camera's there. And that's not a trait everyone has. And we were very fortunate with that.
Yeah. And then Mikey is the other character in our ensemble, and Mike's actually Bobby's brother. So he was an easy casting choice. Really, it's not about his brother. If he was anything like Bobby personality wise, or me or Jeff, it wouldn't work. He does really have his own style and look, and he's the comic relief to the story, because he's just he's on point with so many things, and he knows how to push Bobby's buttons. So that really got some good on-screen chemistry.
Well, he's good too. He had his own show on Travel Channel. He's had two, and so he knows the lay of the land of a lot of these places. It was just nice to even have two for restaurants after we were done shooting. So he has a lot of experience from, I wouldn't say Travel Channel is the same as his feature, but it's not that far off in style. So it was an easy fit, and like I said, we needed a lot of people to kind of put themselves in our hands, and for not a lot of money. I mean, it was the only way to do it. And I think you see the chemistry on film, which I'm glad.
Yeah. No, you could tell you guys were all friends in real life. I think that absolutely did come across. So you guys were all in the original version that you made, and then all the same actors you used in the second version. How much other crew is there on a film like this, aside from you five?
In the version that's coming out October 10th?
Yeah.
I think over 100.
Yeah, it was crazy to really look around. That when we'd be at, remembering back when we shot the original, it was a crew of 5 to 7, depending on how many people we could get us to help besides the 5 of us every night. And then, like Bobby said, over 100. And you're doing the same thing. You've got the same RV. You're at a haunt and looking around and going, oh my God, look at all these people that it takes. If you really want to make a professional look and sound and all that. So,
so let's just touch quickly. What does a script like this look like? I mean, obviously there's going to be some, ad-libbing, impromptu stuff. What did you guys start with at the beginning, first day of shooting? What did you guys have?
Well, so I'd say it's probably 20 to 30 pages less than a normal feature. Just because there's certain times there's a generalization of where you need to go. We have written out scenes. We have, the screenplay that any interview questions are obviously in stone. And then a lot of the script part of it is written in a fashion of, how we saw the scene going, but also while we're sitting there, and Zack and I being on set as the cast as well, we were able to lead people. So I kind of always describe it as when you make these kind of movies, the only way to make it for the audience to buy it is that you need to let them go a little bit with their character, or it's going to have a cadence that's not correct for real life. Movie cadence and real life cadence is different. And so if you get from A to D to G, you know, and you fill in the in-betweens, as long as you get to that place, then we're good. So as long as we brought them back in case people strayed off, and sometimes they tell maybe some weird story, but it's actually very relevant. All that stuff works really well for the story, but yet we bring them all the way back to where we need to go in the script. So certain scenes are by the book, what we wrote, and then certain scenes, you know, you let them ad lib and go and just make sure that they end where you need them to end.
And there was a lot more as far as I would say when it's inside the RV. That's definitely where it's more, you know, we're able to go, okay, cut, like, let's tell that story again. You know, let's have a different tone here. You jump in here and kind of give more direction. And then when we're out, you know, at the haunts, we don't want to say cut because we want these people to feel comfortable that they are in a documentary style type thing where they can kind of take stories where they want to go. We're not going to have somebody tell a couple minute story and then go, okay, cut. Can you tell that again? That just didn't feel organic to us. But inside the RV was more where we could do, okay, that's take one, that's take two, that's take three. You know, somebody could mess up and we could go back and we had all these hours of driving time as well. I mean, you can see in the movie that, you know, Jeff's actually driving the RV you know, from haunt to haunt. So we do have these, you know, blocks of time to shoot these kind of character building scenes and amping up, you know, the drama.
If you miss a story with a non-actor, I think it's so hard to have them repeat it. It's very cardboard. And so you just have to make sure you kind of go with the flow with that. So it's kind of tough.
Yeah. So maybe you can just give our audience some actual dates. You said the movie comes out October 10th or 11th. Give us the dates and tell us how people could potentially see this.
Yeah, it's October 10th, and it's going to be in AMC theaters in 10 markets. So,
okay.
I got one thing.
Okay.
Detroit, Chicago, LA, Houston, Dallas, Orlando, Philly, and New York.
Atlanta.
And Atlanta.
Okay.
And we were excited. We just found out too that it's going to be playing in Times Square, which was very fun for us to hear.
Yeah. So, and then it will be released on video on demand soon after that?
The same day and date. So you can get it on demand on October 10th as well.
Yeah, no matter who your cable provider is or if you have satellite.
Okay, perfect. So what's next for you guys? This movie is getting released here shortly, so I assume you guys are already working on your next project. What do you guys have coming down the pike?
Yeah, we're repped at William Morris, and they're just sending us tons of scripts every day and sending out the trailer and getting people excited about seeing the movie. And then I think because it's so close, you know, we're basically saying, okay, watch the movie, and then we'll let that's why you have good agents. You let them line up a couple things that you might be interested in, and then you kind of whittle down. I mean, it's crazy to think how many scripts, you know, we get sent from them because, you know, people want it. It's you know, engaging and figuring out interest levels. Okay, we're interested in you guys a little bit based off your trailer, so why don't you read this script and see if you might be interested in us? And then, you know, a handful of the ones we say, you know, hey, we think we could do something with this. And it's like, okay, great. Now our interest level's peaked, and now we can, you know, then WME goes back to them and says, okay, the guys are interested. Let's set up a meeting. And you know, you're feeling each other out and seeing what makes sense.
Now, why are they sending you guys scripts? You guys are writers yourself. Would you just direct them, act in them?
I think some of it is just green lighting right away. I mean, there's this whole post for us has been very arduous and very long and very kind of, we'd like to not wash our hands, but we're so ready for the next project. I think there might be something to cleansing even our brain palette of moving to somebody else's project that we really appreciate and like, and then diving back into one of ours. The past 3 months, we've been also working, writing a script with Kyle Ward. And so once that is completed, that's something we'd like to tackle probably next year. But if there was anything in between, I think it'll give us a little bit of a break. And I'd like to see somebody else's vision on something that, you know, really executes a story well. And it'll probably be easier on us so we can kind of recharge a little bit.
I think, too, a big thing, at least from the agency standpoint, of something that already has funding. So a lot of these scripts that are coming in are saying, you know, hey, they've got, you know, XYZ millions of dollars to do this. we've got a producer, we've got the script, everybody's happy with it. They want to green light it. They want to get this project off the ground. They just need somebody to take the reins and do it.
So you guys would produce and direct it is the idea.
Correct. Yes.
I see. Perfect. So, well, what's the best way for people to keep up with you and potentially just follow along with what you guys are doing? You on Twitter, Facebook, you can mention those.
Yes. Zack and I both are. I'm at Bobby Rowe 1 on Twitter, and you're at Andrew Zack.
Yeah.
And then if you follow houses, what I've been real proud of is the still photography we have for the movie is actually been really nice to go through and go back to, because when you're picking out posters and when you're going through that, and we probably have 2,000 images. So we started an Instagram account just not too long ago, probably only about a month ago, but just started throwing it out there. So that's at Houses Octoberville. But I think it's a fun, different kind of Instagram account. I'd never had one before, but I've tried to do it that we updated it about 11:30 at night. So it's the last thing you see before you go to bed. And most of these images aren't exactly what you want to see when you close your eyelids. So
of course, Facebook as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Facebook. Yeah. Perfect. I'll track down all those links and I'll put them in the show notes so people can just click directly over to them. Well, guys, this has been a great interview. Lots of great information. You guys have a very, very inspiring story.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having us on.
I'm going to be running another online class called How to Make the Opening Pages of Your Screenplay Awesome. This is probably my favorite class to teach. I actually learn a lot by preparing for these classes and reading the various scripts we're going to cover in them, so hopefully you'll learn a lot too. It goes without saying how important the opening pages are for your screenplay. If your opening pages don't hook the reader, there's very little chance that the reader will continue to read the script, so it really doesn't matter how great the rest of it is. If the opening pages aren't good, no one will ever know how good the other pages are. I'm going to be breaking down the opening pages of a bunch of great screenplays, including Natural Born Killers, Shawshank Redemption, and Legally Blonde, and a few others too. This is the third class in the series, which is going to guide you through the entire screenwriting process, from coming up with a marketable concept to outlining to writing it to actually marketing it. If you missed the first two classes, that's not a problem. I recorded them and put them in the SYS Select forum for you to listen to at your leisure. This class is going to be on Saturday, November 15th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. If you'd like to learn more about this class, go to www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/classes. Also, if you're listening to this after the class has taken place, no problem. I will record this class as well and put it in the SYS Select forum too. In fact, all the classes that have been taught are recorded and are in the forum for the SYS Select members to listen to whenever they want. There's more than a dozen classes in there now. To learn more about SYS Select, just go to www.sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. In the next episode of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast, I'm going to be interviewing John Suits. John is a writer, director, and producer. He's doing low-budget genre films and having a fair amount of success with them. We talk extensively about how he got his start and how he's been able to maintain a successful career. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. There are a lot of great lessons. Just want to wrap up today just by talking about some of the things that, I learned from interviewing Bobby Rowe and Zack Andrews. First, hopefully you found this story inspirational. It's a group of guys just going out there and making things happen for themselves. They had an idea that they believed in and they took action. I really believe more than anything else, that's the most important thing you can do to succeed in this industry. Just go out there and take action. One thing I would like to talk a bit about is this idea of putting the financing on credit cards. Outside of Hollywood, you only hear of the ones like this one where they actually succeeded and it seems to have worked. But I've lived in Hollywood for a long time now, and I've seen countless people try this and fail. And trust me, it ain't pretty when it fails. So I get a little worried when people do this sort of thing. Really look at what the guys did that I just interviewed too, and be realistic with yourself. This wasn't just a bunch of guys from Idaho going out there and shooting a movie using credit cards to finance it. They had been working in the industry for quite a while. They had some successes with some of their screenplays. This sort of thing is always risky, but I would just like to emphasize, if something like this is going to work, these are exactly the sorts of guys who can make it work, because they've basically been on the verge of success, and this just pushes them over the edge. So if you're out there thinking about trying something like this, I would advise that you spend a few years working in the industry like these guys did, hopefully having some small successes like these guys did, and then eventually when you're ready to try something like this, you can at least mitigate the risk as much as possible because you will be a professional in many ways. Also, I would really advise you to check this movie out. It's a very well crafted from a story point of view. Aside from the good production value, the pacing is really solid. Every time things start to slow down, they throw in a nice twist and get that horror thriller angle going again. Watching the film, you really get the sense that it's a pretty polished piece of work. A lot of these sort of very, very low budget films, especially very, very low budget found footage films, they seem to really drag at times. And this is not the case with this film. These guys did a really good job keeping the pacing up. And again, I think that's because they have been working in the industry for a while. They really had a pretty good sense of story and screenwriting and pacing. I've mentioned this before on the podcast, and hopefully you heard what they were saying too. One of the reasons I think this film worked for them is because they had really thought through their concept. It's a solid concept for a horror film and especially a found footage film. And I think there's more to it than just a good story hook. Logistically, it was a solid concept as well. You heard what they said. They were able to shoot at these locations for free. So they got a tremendous amount of production value for basically no money. And this is a big thing. One thing that low budget films usually really suffer from is a lack of production value. So when you're considering your own concepts, put on your producer hat and really consider the concept from the producer's angle too. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.